it's almost like talking to somebody about eating healthy on an empty stomach, right? I mean, it's just like, okay, I don't have Wi-Fi. What are you talking about, right? You're talking about artificial intelligence and blockchain and RPA.
Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group, an exit interview with longtime Labor CIO Gundeep Ahluwalia. What's next for Ahluwalia and the Labor Department after his departure? It's Tuesday, August 27th, 2024. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you'll hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. Here are today's top headlines. We've got a pair of defense-focused stories. First up, Jon Kosloski, a longtime national security expert in quantum optics and other novel technology areas, has officially entered the Pentagon as the next permanent director of its All-domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the Defense Department announced on Monday. Kosloski, who assumed this role on detail from the National Security Agency, will oversee all of the DoD's work to address possible incidents involving unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, the modern term for UFOs that encompasses objects that can also operate in space or underwater. Pentagon Press Secretary Major General Pat Ryder told reporters Monday during an off-camera briefing that Kosloski will head DoD's efforts in coordination with the intelligence community to minimize technical and intelligence surprise by synchronizing scientific intelligence and operational detection, identification, attribution, and mitigation of UAP in the vicinity of national security areas. The department has employed multiple previous and more secretive iterations of UAP investigating teams over the past few decades. But Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks formally established AARO in July 2022 in response to then growing calls for more transparency from Congress, whistleblowers, and the broader American public on this historically controversial topic. At the time of its launch, Hicks named Sean Kirkpatrick as AARO's first permanent director. He led the office for its initial 18 months. Following Kirkpatrick's departure in late 2023, Tim Phillips stepped up to serve as AARO's acting director during the hiring process for its next chief. In other news out of the Pentagon, the Defense Innovation Unit is on the hunt for generative artificial intelligence tools to help the U.S. military with joint planning and wargaming. DIU issued a solicitation to industry Friday via its Commercial Solutions opening contracting mechanism to support an effort called ThunderForge. To improve the joint planning process across the military, officials are looking to generative AI systems to, quote, augment human planners and command staff by rapidly processing information, producing draft planning products, and ultimately aiding in generating options, according to the solicitation. The DIU solicitation notes that the organization is looking for tech that can quickly ingest, process, and summarize large volumes of info relevant to military planning from diverse source modalities and data formats. The wish list includes the ability to identify key insights, patterns, and relationships from the data fed into the system, as well as produce draft operations plans, concept plans, and operations orders, among other desired attributes. On top of that, DIU wants to enlist wargaming as part of the solution to inform operational planning and activities. Officials seek AI solutions that can perform automated wargaming of courses of action against likely adversary actions and produce comparative analysis of course of action advantages, disadvantages, and risks per the solicitation. And to help maintain human oversight, the Defense Department wants personnel to be able to easily review, modify, refine, and compare products that the AI churns out. Responses to the solicitation are due by September 6. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, visit fedscoop.com. Longtime Department of Labor CIO Gundeep Ahluwalia recently stepped away from government after more than 8 years with the DOL and another 4 with the FDA. Leaving behind a legacy of wholesale digital transformation across labor, Ahluwalia now takes on a role as Executive Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer for government technology contractor NuAxis Innovations. Ahluwalia joins the podcast for an exit interview to recount his journey and accomplishments as Labor CIO, the keys to his success, what's ahead for the agency now that he's moved on, and much, much more. Let's go now to that interview with Gundeep Ahluwalia. Gundeep, Fantastic to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
It's so great to see you, Billy, as well. And thank you for the opportunity. It's always scintillating to have some conversations with you.
Well, we've talked a lot over the years. You've been in government for, it's been more than a decade, but in the CIO position at Department of Labor, you were there 8 years, and you just recently announced that you were moving on. And I think there's no better way to start this conversation than to get to the news and say, what's happening? What's the next step for Gundeep Ahluwalia?
So thank you so much for that introduction. I think 10, 11 years in the government have been great. They've been very fulfilling. 8 years at Labor. I do think that I wanted a change of pace, but I am addicted to public service. I do not want to leave that impact on Americans and employers and things that we do for them. So I started thinking, how do I reinvent myself and what do I do? NuAxis Innovations is the company. By the way, I'm coming to you from our new offices in Tyson's Corner. Is a company that I have worked with in the past. I've observed from a distance in the past. And I came in and I have joined them as the EVP and the Chief Innovation Officer to bring innovation, but also to continue doing the customer experience, the digital transformation work that I had been doing at Labor, but just doing it and expanding it across multiple agencies. So that is what happened, and that is how now I am at NuAxis Innovations and looking forward.
And I think I'm going off the cuff here, but I think I remember seeing that your role is you're an SVP and Chief Innovation Officer.
Yes, the Executive Vice President and the Chief Innovation Officer. That is the title, indeed. And the focus is to pick up some of the work that NuAxis has already done, right, in various space, especially focused on our customer experience work. We recently started this campaign called DevSecCX Ops, right? I mean, people are just talking about DevSecOps. Well, what about customer experience? You could build the best product, and then the experience is bad, and nobody will ever use it. And that's, I think, one of the things that the government actually has to learn going forward, right? Not only the executive order on digital experience, but also realizing that we are competing with the private sector in terms of how people consume our services, right? Whether it's, and usually when government services are consumed in times of duress, sometimes, right? I mean, you've lost a home to a hurricane, or you've unemployment insurance benefits, or so all of these benefits, if they are hard to navigate and hard to consume, whether digitally or not, it is extremely difficult. And that's one thing that I had been doing at Labor, and I'm proud that I will be continuing to do at NuAxis Innovations as well.
That's incredible. And you definitely had a lot that you accomplished during your time at Labor. You were there 8 plus years. And, I'm sure it was a tough decision to step away. I'm sure it wasn't easy. So how did you go about making that decision? You sort of answered that a bit and saying that, you wanted to do something new, but, how did you kind of weigh that decision?
Yeah, no, so it's never an easy decision when you're making especially at my, at the juncture of my career, right? I mean, I'm at a place where I'm not going to work with folks who, if I don't agree with their way of working, etc. So I think one of the biggest things has always been people and how they interact, how authentic they are, how transparent they are. So that was one of the key factors in me choosing what my next step is going to be. Second is public service, right? I do want to make sure that I'm continuing to build on the experience that I have, but also reform government digital experiences for American people. So that was a second tenet. Now, the third is obviously, do I go large? Do I go small? Do I go medium? Right? And these are all things. Do I go to a product company? Do I go to a services company? And I will tell you that I went through the entire gamut, and at the end, I think NuAxis Innovations is the right sized company with a leadership that is forward leaning, not risk averse. But also will allow me to innovate and build the company and the business from where we are, while providing that digital customer experience that the Americans so deserve, whether we are partnering with Interior or with agriculture or with labor or with any of the other organizations in there. And I would say that recently, and I shared this, Billy, before the interview a little bit with you. Over the last 2 years, I've also trained myself to be a EMT. So I am a volunteer EMT in Sterling Fire and Rescue in Sterling, Virginia. And that work is indeed very important to me in order to be able to continue that. So that was another subtext of during my search. I always had it in the back of my mind. What opportunities would allow me to not only do the public service in the federal space and affect Americans in that manner, but also be able to continue to positively impact my local community that has given so much over the last 15 years that I have lived in Sterling, Virginia, and Loudoun County.
That's incredible. I mean, not a lot of people who put their lives on the line, literally, but to just give back to their community. And as somebody who lives just down the road, I hope I never bump into you when you're on duty. But
I hope you never have to see me.
I hope so too. But I appreciate it nonetheless. And that's quite an incredible thing to do on the side, on top of all that you've had going on. So really cool to hear about that. I would love to, again, 8 years is a long time, and I'm sure there's been quite a few accomplishments that you're proud of. I remember talking to you back during the pandemic about, just the craze of what was going on then and everything that labor was doing to support states with unemployment insurance when the world was kind of going to hell. But I'm curious, looking back on those 8 years, I'm sure there's so many highlights, but I'd love to hear what sticks out as some of the most important moments to you as the CIO of the Department of Labor.
Yeah. So when I look back, I mean, like you said, the accomplishments are many. And they are all shared accomplishments, first of all. I don't want, they're of course, they happened on my watch, but they do not happen without a village. So that is one acknowledgement that I want to do up top. But there are a few things that really mattered. The one that initially when I joined labor, right, I think we didn't have Wi-Fi in the building, and I remember my daughter refused to come to work with me. She said, like, "Do you have Wi-Fi?" That was her first question, and then I realized how hard it is going to be to have a conversation in the department about. It's almost like talking to somebody about eating healthy on an empty stomach. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, it's just like, okay, I don't have Wi-Fi. What are you talking about? Right? You're talking about artificial intelligence and blockchain and RPA and customer experience. So those conversations would never have happened had we not solved the commodities at labor, right? So the Wi-Fi, the laptop, there's the phone, and all of that now, and it became so vital during COVID, right? We almost onboarded about 3,000 new employees during COVID seamlessly, right? I mean, there was like the laptops would be issued, they would go home, and all because we had made the investments in infrastructure. There was no issue around bandwidth or VPN capacity or cybersecurity risk enhanced because everybody's remote, et cetera, et cetera. So that I think is a key piece that I always tell folks, right? Hey, you cannot talk to people about eating healthy without on an empty stomach, right? So I think that's just one big piece that we had to go through. Not that I wanted to talk about laptops and phones and internet connections with people, but without those, you can't even have the higher level, the higher value conversations with people. One of the biggest things that I am really proud of is also the people. Like I said in the beginning, I acknowledge the village that allowed me to sort of accomplish all of this. I am so proud of the leadership factory that we have created. Almost, it's an engine, right? Um, and we've built a culture of, hey, how can digital transformation enable mission, right? That's the focus. I do not want anybody in my shop. I always tell people, you're not a Windows administrator. You're not a network engineer. You are those things. But unless it helps keep a mind safe, or it helps deliver a mission benefit to somebody, a veteran, or collect data on statistics that can be create that jobless reports number, then if you're not able to tie into that, then our core profession doesn't make any difference, right? So that connection has been so vital in building that culture. And I'm telling you, I am so proud at some of the numbers, right? Even though these numbers that I'm going to rattle off at you do not truly capture the cultural shift that has happened in the IT workforce, but it does say a lot of things. So, number of women have gone from 22% to 48% in
Wow.
OCIO, okay, over my 8 years. And it didn't happen by accident. And we were not hiring only because somebody is of a particular gender. We have always hired for competence, right? But competence is an equal opportunity offender, right? So that is how 22 to 48, 75% of these women are GS 13 and above. Several of them were appointed to the senior executive service under my watch. 27% veterans. 38% minorities, right? I mean, these are all things. So we were always hiring for competence, connecting these people in their work to the mission delivery, right? And we have landed up with a very diverse, competent, skilled work engine that will always be working for America, right?
Yep.
That's another thing that was important for me, and that's why I came to NuAxis, because I see the same fabric in NuAxis Innovations, where Raza and the leadership here has built it. The other thing that I'll talk a little bit about, and you touched on this, we did a lot of digital transformation programs, from workman compensation, changing the customer experience there. People had to sign a piece of paper and send it to snail mail, and then we had to match that to a particular claim in order to pay it. Nope, you just have to digitally sign it now, right? We had currency-like paper in our immigration processes. Every permanent resident, every green card holder, or every temp visa holder, your first stop is the Department of Labor. And it used to be printed on an archaic, old currency-like paper. And all of that currency paper went to the Department of Homeland Security for the next step in the process, right? So I knew where it'll all land up, and yet I was doing it completely digital now. It comes in to you like a United boarding pass. By the way, I came through that immigration process. I have my labor certificate on currency-like paper, and the last currency-like paper along with my labor certificate is one of the treasured, framed accomplishments that I took away from the Department of Labor. Another one is the unemployment insurance. Folks were really struggling at that time. People lost their benefits, or they had to go 100 miles, 50 miles to just prove their identification. And we started this, not only a digital pathway to prove your ID through login.gov, but we said, what about the person who's in Arkansas or is in Middle America? There is a post office very close to them. So we tied up with United States Postal Office. That service is live in 15 states, Billy, and 375,000 people have used it at this point in time, right? So, I mean, and this particular service the idea came from my neighbor is a letter carrier. So we were playing cribbage in the backyard. That's where so from idea to 375,000 people going to post offices in 15 states across the United States. It's been about 3 years, right? And I'm so proud of that kind of innovation that we brought about at Labor. So many accomplishments, right? From things as basic as Wi-Fi and laptops and consistency in your commodities of IT, to actually reforming the ability to get your unemployment benefits in rural America through ID proofing and U.S. Postal Service. So digital as well as non-digital accomplishments, right? And that's where I try to tell my people, like, if you become a software engineer only, you will be thinking about only digital pathways, right? Which is not the true customer experience, because rural America doesn't even have a smartphone, let alone 5G, right? So these non-digital pathways are equally important. There is a digital component. We had to connect that local U.S. Postal Service office with that local state, because it's a federal-state partnership, the UI, right? So we wrote a small API to do that connection, right? But it served so many people across America who had to go. And under times of duress, right? You've lost your job. You're looking for a new job. You don't know how you'll pay your mortgage. And we are giving you a bad experience to say, hey, how about go prove your ID 55 miles away from your house in a state workforce agency office, right? So those are the kind of things that really stay with me, Billy. We did a whole bunch of other things too. But those are the things that I will cherish the most.
Yeah, no, those are great answers. And one of the things that made me think of as you were describing these accomplishments was, Department of Labor was one of the agencies, one of the departments that really leaned on the Technology Modernization Fund for its purpose to increase that mission effectiveness through digital transformation. You don't have to go too deep into detail, but because you did, rely on that and go that avenue several times. Tell me just I guess your thoughts on the program and its ability to drive that sort of transformation.
So this is something that I always believed in from the private sector, because when I came to the government, right, I said, like, hey, most of my money is in operations and maintenance. So how am I supposed to reform and build the new thing, right, and move over? Well, there's no seed money. In the private sector, you would go to the board, or you would go to a investor and get the seed money to get out of that digital debt that you have incurred. I remember at Labor, 90% of our money was entangled in operations and maintenance. Only 10% used to go in building new things, right? Today, we are almost 26, 27% of building new things, and the operations and maintenance has shrunk, right? Technology Modernization Fund was one of the important ways for us to get that seed money, right? I remember when TMF came out, folks said, oh, Labor may not be sexy enough to be able to compete for this money. Well, guess what? We have 6 awards from them, right? As a companion, I also went to the Hill and requested for another authority that most of my fellow CIOs did not have. And that was to sweep up expired funds at the end of the year. Sometimes the government is either unable to spend the money at the end of the year, especially grant accounts and things of that nature, right? Or some of them may make less than optimal decisions at the end of the year to allocate it as best as they can. So we have an expiring funds sweep authority for IT modernization at the Department of Labor, which I'm very proud of. It will remain an authority after I leave, and will continue to be a source of that seed money. So between TMF and that authority, Billy, we did about $150 million of new seed money that allowed us to reform our digital infrastructure at Labor over the last 3 years or so.
That's quite incredible, especially in the latter point, to get that going and, building a tool, a vehicle, whatever you want to call it, that's going to live beyond your time at Labor. Really cool to see.
Totally.
Speaking of that, at least in your time, the time beyond you at Labor, we talked about your accomplishments, but what's sort of the road ahead for the department? As you say goodbye and prepare your colleagues, that dream team, that talented group of individuals who are staying with the department, what's ahead for them? What are the key things they're going to have to address?
Yeah. So I always and my team knows this, that this is not a destination, right? They wanted to be best in federal service, but I would argue they are best in federal service at this time. But to remain there, they had to continue making investments in the digital infrastructure. That 25% building new should almost go to 30% in my mind in order to stay healthy, right? Because you cannot treat IT or digital assets like once and done, right? They're a continuum, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence, emerging technologies. This will all push pressure on government to deliver digital services to the Americans in a different manner. The other thing that I always remind people is that there is a revolution that is already happening. One, green jobs. There's a lot of pressure on the older fossil fuel industry, so that the green jobs are coming in. Two, there's going to be self-driving cars, there's going to be self-driving planes, there's going to be self-driving trains, and all of that will probably happen in the next 10, 15 years. I don't know how long, but it is a reality that will impact a sizable portion of American workers, right? Either they will require to be retrained or redeployed in another manner. And three is artificial intelligence. And last time when this sort of a revolution happened, most of the blue collar workforce is largely impacted. This time, artificial intelligence is going to affect you. It's going to affect me and how we do our business. Maybe there has got to be a digital companion going forward to a CIO. So these three, if you put them together, it is almost clear to me that we have to retrain at least a quarter to one third of the American workforce today in the next 10 to 15 years.
Wow.
What is your best investment to do that? It is the Department of Labor. We manage $23 billion worth of training grants to retrain America. I think it's grossly insufficient, and it will definitely get the attention that it deserves over the next 5, 10, 15 years, which means the digital infrastructure of the Department of Labor has to keep up with that demand and make sure that that money is usefully deployed through state and local partnership so that we can impact rural America and not commit the mistakes of the past of leaving them behind.
I think that's I haven't heard it put that way, but I think you're right, and it seems like it's so imperatively important, and makes a lot of sense. Gundeep, as we close, and I think we're close to time, but I'd love to hear, as you left that role, and again, thinking of the people that are still there, what was sort of your wisdom that you passed on, or your advice to them to, outside of what you just told me, and focus on these things, there's going to be this transformation, what did you share with them? Any knowledge upon your leaving, or anything else that you discussed on your way out?
Yeah, I think it is always about the people, and mission is extremely important. It's not about IT, it's about the people and mission delivery. Those are two things that I left with my team over there. And those are two things that I have brought to NuAxis over here as well. If we can concentrate on what value we provided to the people we serve, if we can reform their customer experience, if we can reform our employee experience, the people who actually deliver those services at the Department of Labor, right? And then create value, whether it's for unemployment insurance, whether it's for visas, whether it is for CBP at the border entry, whether it is the TSA at experience at airports. It is always about people. And if we are able to keep them at the center of digital as well as non-digital pathways, we will be able to provide them services that make sense. And the government will be not only relevant, but remain at the forefront of that delivery.
Well, I think I said it in our kind of talk before we started and hit record, but it's always been a pleasure to chat with you. 8 years doesn't feel like it was long enough because you're such a joy to talk to, but I am happy that you're remaining in the public sector technology space with NuAxis. So definitely looking forward to running into you a bit more in your new role. But once again, congratulations, and it's always a pleasure, Gundeep.
Thank you for the opportunity, Billy. Over the years, you have been a pleasure and a delight to not only talk about, but also your questions have scintillated me towards areas that I have never, it opens my mind up. So thank you so much.
Well, definitely best of luck moving on, and we'll talk again soon.
Take care.
For more on modernization at the Department of Labor, visit fedscoop.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Daily Scoop podcast, available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people to find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back tomorrow with more top headlines. Until then, I'm your host, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for listening.